Thank you very much, Gabriel.
I don't know if there are
Appreciate
any questions, but
Thank you. Well,
Okay.
we can. This is perfect.
All right,
I
great.
look forward to participating in your own challenge.
Okay.
Thank you. At this point, I would like to introduce two distinguished guests who will talk about how innovative next-generation technologies are affecting
That's for sure.
the policy debate in Washington. So first, I'd like to introduce Alex Wilhelm, who will be joining us up here in a minute. He's from TechCrunch. In the past, he helped grow the Next Web into a leading publication, also worked for MidVentures in Chicago, where he attended school, and co-founded Contenture, a startup focused on micropayments and monetization of digital content. So he's an entrepreneur as well as a journalist. And we're also very, very pleased to welcome today Gigi Sohn, Special Counsel for External Affairs at the FCC. She served since 2001 as the President and CEO of Public Knowledge, and from 2011 to 2013 as the co-chair of the Board of Directors of the Broadband Internet Technical Advisory Group. So Alex is going to present some questions to Gigi, and then at the end of this session, we'll have about 10 minutes for audience questions as well. So please join me in welcoming Alex Wilhelm and Gigi Sohn. Thank you very much for joining us.
Of course.
My pleasure.
How's it going, Gigi?
I'm doing great. So I want to say hi to everybody here and thanks, Bill, for the invitation. Greetings from Chairman Wheeler, who just is on a plane as we speak, coming back from a couple days of net neutrality meetings, which maybe Alex will tell me about.
We just may or may not do that.
May or may not do that. This is the second of my 3 speaking gig tour in a week. I started out the week in extremely hot and humid Fort Lauderdale with Heather Gold, talking to the Fiber to the Home Council conference out there, and then I close out in Las Vegas. Who doesn't want to end in Las Vegas where it's 105 degrees, talking to the American Library Association about E-rate, which is the money that we give to schools and libraries to buy new technology, and also about open internet, because that's all anybody wants to really talk about these days. So hopefully Alex will talk to me about some other stuff.
Yes, we will go over quite a number of things. I want to start by saying the soccer score last time I checked was 0-0, so go
Please
USA.
keep us updated.
Yes.
Well, who?
1-0. Are we winning?
Boo.
Okay, I'll take that. So to start, Gigi, you've been at the FCC for less than a year now. Has the experience thus far kind of lived up to your early expectations of what your role would be?
I mean, it's really exceeded the expectations. So for those of you that don't know me very well, I am a lawyer, although I've hardly practiced for the last 15 years. I started out in a private law firm, and then I went to a public interest organization doing communications policy on behalf of consumers. The name of that organization, which is now defunct, is Media Access Project. I went to the Ford Foundation for a couple years, and then I started my own organization, consumer advocacy organization called Public Knowledge, which did both telecommunications policy advocacy and also intellectual property policy advocacy on behalf of consumers, internet users. So this is my first turn in government. And I knew it was going to be fun, and I knew it was going to be intense, but I didn't realize how intense. And the amount of stuff that we have before us, not only open internet, but 2 major mergers, probably a 3rd coming down the pike. The chairman really wants to keep busy. He sees that we have a lot to do. So we're doing, as I said before, we're modernizing and reforming the E-rate system. He's got some stuff in cybersecurity he wants to do. We have an incentive auction where the broadcasters hopefully will sell their spectrum back to the government, and then we resell it to the wireless carriers. I mean, we have got an awful lot on our plate. And it's fun, and it's intense, and it's crazy, and I'm really enjoying it.
It feels like there's never been more public attention on the FCC than there is right now. It feels like this is kind of the perfect storm of regulation and mergers, and especially the net neutrality rule kicking up a lot of dust. Why do you think net neutrality specifically has resonated so heavily with consumers so far?
I think for several reasons. I mean, you know, the last time the FCC tried to adopt net neutrality rules was 2010. And as I think many of you know, those rules were recently, this past January, struck down by a court. And while there was a lot of attention on the net neutrality rules in 2010, I would multiply that by 10 times now. I think you literally have millions of people weighing in, whether it be through actual comments or through our email box or through Twitter or Facebook. I mean, this has grabbed national attention. And I think for a couple of reasons. Number one is just the internet, even in the 4 years since 2010, has become even more central to people's lives. And they want fast, robust, and affordable internet. And what they're not really seeing as much fast and robust internet as they'd like, and hopefully thanks to you guys that will change. And they also don't think it's affordable. So I think there's a lot of anxiety around the ability to afford internet access. I think there's a lot of, you mentioned the mergers. There's a lot of anxiety about those mergers. People don't like consolidation. So I think the interest in net neutrality, I talked to a lot of people outside the Beltway, that's my job. And we talked to the protesters who've come in front of the FCC. And when you talk to them, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is not net neutrality, it's anxiety over consolidation. So I think a lot of things are driving the anxiety around net neutrality and kind of coalescing around this particular issue. But I will say that it is so exciting that people care so deeply about what we do. Look, I spent 20 plus years as a public interest advocate trying to convince funders and the public at large that what we did was important, and I largely failed. So now I'm in a place where finally people do care. So that's really exciting, and I think the chairman shares my sentiment.
Speaking of that amount of care, there was a comedy segment done by a man named John Oliver. You
Really?
may have heard of this.
Nah.
Did like 18 views on YouTube.
Yeah.
In it, he satirically attacked your boss, the chairman, I believe calling him a dingo. And of course, Chairman Wheeler responded saying that actually he wasn't a dingo. But it sounds like there's a public perception of him that doesn't match up with your specific views on Wheeler. You've been very effusive and positive and warm about him in interviews that I've seen, and yet when you look at the public side of things, there's a lot of, not antipathy, but doubt. And I was wondering if you could explain the dissonance between those two different kind of spheres of opinion.
Look, I think it's easy to look at my boss's resume and say, oh, he was a cable lobbyist, he was a wireless lobbyist, so therefore he's in the pockets of those companies. And that is a very superficial look at the chairman's resume. His resume also shows that he was a venture capitalist, that he was an entrepreneur that tried to get his inventions on closed cable networks and sometimes failed, or sometimes had the cable operator say, you want to get on my network? You have to pay me money. Okay, so he has a wide variety of experience, and his experience both with the cable industry and the wireless industry were at a time where they were the disruptors, right? I mean, he's a history buff, which is what makes him a great chairman, and I wish more people would read history. Because when he was the head of the cable industry in the 70s and 80s, the broadcasters were using the regulatory process to try to regulate them out of business, right? So he knows about disruptive technologies. He knows about trying to get on closed networks. He's also at a time in his life, I'll say his age, he doesn't mind, he's 68 years old. He has done very well in his life. He didn't need this job. He doesn't need another job. He's not going to be looking around for his next gig. So he is really independent-minded. His values are right. I mean, he and I had a lot of conversations when he asked me to come to the commission, because for me to leave my reputation as a public interest advocate to go work at the FCC, a person who's long been a critic of the agency, was not a small decision on my part. But it became clear we really share the same